Welcome to Open Forum, where we discuss religion, world, and contemporary issues. Today's topic is around a new campaign that is being launched by the MTA Muslim community called True Islam. And our three guests today, starting from my right, is Qasim Rashid. Qasim is the author of The Wrong Kind of Muslim and Extremist, and he's a fellow at Harvard. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And next we have Salam Bhatti, who is a practicing attorney in New York City. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Salam.
And we have Amjad Khan, who is an adjunct professor at UCLA Law School, as well as a practicing attorney in Southern California.
Thank you.
Three lawyers. This is great. So let's get right into it. Salam, what is this new campaign that you guys are launching?
So we've been seeing a lot of extremism emerging, especially from people who claim to be Muslims throughout the world. And it's affecting
So
people.
they're not really Muslims?
They're not following true Islam. And what we want to present through this campaign, and what we are presenting through words and actions, is what Islam actually teaches through its Quran and through the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad.
So what is the campaign? What are you going to be doing?
So we have 11 points laid out for the True Islam campaign. The first point is about extremism. And we're showing people through video and through good works how to dispel terrorism from Islam.
So this is going to be an education campaign for Muslims, for Americans, for a worldwide audience?
Yes, so we really want to let the Muslim youth know and the Muslim leadership know that, hey, Muslim leaders, if you're teaching that terrorism is allowed in Islam, that this disorder is allowed, you're doing it wrong. And so we want the Muslim youth to know that this is what Islam actually teaches. And then we want to let the Americans and the whole world know this is what Islam is.
So, Qasim, there's 11 points here.
Mm-hmm.
Your first point, it seems like an obvious one, but it's True Islam rejects all form of terrorism. Explain that to me.
Well, the basic premise is that in Islam, there's no permission for terrorism under any circumstance. And the idea behind the True Islam campaign is that all 11 of these points should be non-controversial. These are basic fundamental tenets of Islam that delve into equality between men and women, a condemnation of violent jihad, separation of mosque and state, the need for a unified spiritual leadership. This first point regarding the rejection of terrorism is paramount to combating any kind of radicalization that the youth may be experiencing. And it invites Muslim leaders of all sects and all backgrounds to join us in this campaign against radicalization. And if they choose not to at least join us in the open forum, have an open debate about it, so we can talk about these issues rather than push them under the rug and let them fester where radicalization occurs.
So, Amjad, True Islam rejects all forms of terrorism. I'm quoting the Quran, chapter 3, verse 5. Smite them at their necks, cut off their fingertips, kill the disbelievers wherever you find them. Are you sure that True Islam rejects all forms of terrorism? This verse does not appear to do so.
It's a very good question. When you have a selective verse like that, which is often invoked, this is precisely why we're having the campaign. The verse itself and all verses in the Quran should be understood in their proper context. The idea of killing them wherever you find them or smite them, there are certain preconditions that go into that kind of very limited aggression, and that deals with self-defense when you have been wronged. And at another place in the Quran it says, permission to fight is given upon those upon whom war is made.
But before you go anywhere else, tell me how this verse is not in creating violence, is not forcing people to. I believe people have used this verse to actually commit acts of violence.
Well, terrorism, and this is where the campaign comes, terrorism is about killing the innocent, and an aggressive campaign, an unfettered campaign, an unjustified war, an unjustified killing. The verse in particular that you mentioned in the 3rd chapter of the Quran is not speaking of indiscriminate killing. It's speaking of certain limited conditions that Islam does permit that allows you to wage a war in defense when your freedom of conscience has been deprived, when you have no other choice. Islam doesn't say you can't pick up your sword and not defend yourself. Islam is not a pacifist faith or a faith tradition, but what it is not a faith that allows you to have aggressive war without any sense, without any reason, without any rationality. And so this campaign is about talking about that very verse and many others that perhaps talk about war.
So let's stay on this verse.
Understanding their context.
Let's stay on this verse. Kill them wherever you find them. If these terrorists, such as ISIS, feel like they've been wronged, so they can go to other countries like England, like USA, and kill them where they can find them, right?
It's that incorrect premise that is promoting terrorism. The correct premise is under the specific instruction of the Quran and of Prophet Muhammad that when you are being persecuted, when you are being terrorized, you must first withstand that, then leave your home. And if pursued by those same people terrorizing you, then the Quran says, yes, kill them where you find them. Now, picture this, that you are sitting in your home, somebody comes into your home and tries to kill you and your family. Islam says, yes, you may defend yourself, you may defend your family. And why? And this is the most beautiful part about it. Why must you do it? The Quran says, because if some men were not raised for the defense of others, then the churches and the cloisters and the synagogues and the mosques would all be torn down. So the purpose of fighting in self-defense isn't just to protect your family, it's to protect all people of all faiths. This is such a noble and just teaching. No contemporary constitution to this day has even matched the standard.
So that's helpful, but let's keep building context here. There are lots of arguments, Salam, out there that the word innocent, the definition of innocent or the definition of justice in Islam is different from that definition of innocent or justice because it only refers to Muslims. So you can't kill innocent people, meaning you can't kill Muslims, but you are allowed to kill non-Muslims. So therefore, Charlie Hebdo, all these attacks that have happened, San Bernardino in California, USA, there was a huge attack. If that person did not kill Muslims, is the definition mean it's okay?
So in the Quran, it says that just as we told the children of Israel if you kill an innocent, it is as if you have destroyed all of mankind. An innocent has no asterisk next to it. And God is saying that we are giving you this teaching, Muslims, just as we have given the teaching to the Jews. So this innocent applies to everybody, and everybody in between, faith or no faith. Additionally, justice does have a different definition in Islam than it does with the rest of the world. And that's because justice in Islam is not just justice, but it also involves compassion, like the instinctive love that a mother has for her child. So it goes beyond the justice we see in the world today, and it brings in love and compassion.
So sum this up for me, Amjad. So innocent and justice, there are people who interpret that as only for Muslims. Salam is arguing it's not just for Muslims. You have to be just and not kill innocent people, all faiths. Why are there two interpretations of this by Muslims?
Well, there are multiple interpretations because some extremists would cherry pick verses of the Quran to suit their nefarious ends. Salam is correct. In chapter 10 of the Quran, it says, if God wanted to, everyone on earth could have believed at the same time the same thing. But He didn't do that. And then the Quran says, will you then force others to become believers? So force is not forced faith is no faith at all. Is a Quranic verse. So the notion that that disbelievers or so-called infidels or non-believers are not subject to the same justice or adl by Allah Ta'ala it contradicts everything Islam stands for. And then in Surah Al-Kafirun, it's called the disbelievers, a very famous chapter of the Quran, it says, say to those disbelievers, I don't worship what you worship, and you don't worship what I worship. And I'm not going to worship what you worship, and you're not going to worship what I worship. For you, your religion, for me, my religion. That's the premise that freedom of conscience and freedom to believe what you believe is something that's quintessentially Islamic. Given that, Salam is correct. The innocents don't have an asterisk. There's no exception here, that the principle of aggression or terrorism cannot just apply blindly to people who are not Muslim. In fact, the principle is one of justice that transcends all of humanity.
So, and I'm gonna butt in the innocent verse. Those who have killed an innocent, as if you have killed all of mankind. God also says later in that same verse, those who save an innocent, it is as though you have saved all of mankind. So it's teaching that Muslims should not take a step back and just stay at home and do nothing, but be out there saving lives if possible.
But I think we can all agree, Quran has lots of verses. I mean, and there's a lot of interpretation of those verses. I will share one interpretation with you, Qasim, and then explain it to me. It's from an intellectual forefather before ISIS. Some would argue, others would argue, he really understands Islam. Maulana Abdullah Madudi. He wrote a book called Jihad in Islam, and I will quote from that. Sure. And explain it to me and help me understand it, because this disagrees with all three of you. Islam wishes to destroy all states and governments anywhere on the face of the earth which are opposed to the ideology and program of Islam, regardless of the country or the nation which rules it. He goes on to say, towards this end, Islam wishes to press into service all forces which can bring about a revolution, and a composite term for the use of all these forces is jihad. To change the outlook of the people and initiate a mental revolution among them through speech or writing is a form of jihad. To alter the old tyrannical social system and establish a new just order of life by the power of the sword is also jihad. And to expand goods and exert physically for the cause is jihad too. Now this is a fairly largely followed leader. You guys have one interpretation. Do you agree with him?
Not at all, and here's why. See, this is where it's so critical to have good leadership. Leadership matters in every sphere of life, and most certainly in the Muslim world. One of the reasons why the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS exists is because of following this man's terrorist ideologies. Just for context, Maududi was a 20th century Pakistani journalist. He has zero training on Islam. By most accounts, he only has a high school diploma. So he wasn't an academic, he wasn't a theologian, he was simply somebody who could write and speak eloquently. Now, that doesn't qualify him to be a scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but the reality is that when we consider what Prophet Muhammad taught,
lots of people follow him. I mean, he's not this one-off. He's written a book. Lots of individuals follow him. I mean, to say that, to dismiss him that way may not be appropriate either. I mean, he's got a point of view here.
well, there was a time where the whole world thought that the earth revolved, or the sun revolved around the earth, but that didn't make it right. The reality is that when we look at the interpretation and the application of his teaching, it is not only opposed to the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but it has also resulted in the horrific terrorism that we see today. Juxtapose this with the teachings of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad the Messiah, who very eloquently told us in his book, The British Government in Jihad, written in 1902, that religion which needs the sword to spread slays its own throat before reaching others. And the true religion is that which depends on the arguments, not on the steel. And by following that model, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has spread to 207 nations worldwide, all without a single act of terrorism. This is the jihad of the pen that Prophet Muhammad foretold, not the jihad of terrorism that people like Maududi espouse.
Okay. So Amjad, Maududi, I mean, again, he's a leader. There's a lot of people who follow this ideology. So therefore, this ideology must be Islam, which leads you to believe Islam is a violent religion. I can see the linear connections there. Would you agree?
I don't, because in Islam, the Quran is just one source of guidance. If the practice of the Prophet Muhammad and his sayings contradict what the Quran, what the interpretation is, then that interpretation is incorrect. All Muslims uniformly, 1.5 billion Muslims believe in those three sources of guidance. Take this concept of jihad being encompassing all of these aggressive acts. Jihad, the idea of struggle, comes from your internal struggle. It says that in the Quran. What was the grand and great struggle of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad? Did he go and kill people innocently? He fought defensive wars. He was outnumbered, outmatched. He fought wars of limited physical self-defense. His jihad, the grand jihad, was the jihad and the struggle to cleanse your own soul, to become pure. So if he's saying that this jihad is a jihad of world conquest, that 100% contradicts what the founder of Islam did and what he said. So therefore it has to be discredited. He is right, Maududi, in one sense. There can be jihad of physicality, but it's limited to the conditions that we just spoke about. So he's not discredited in that way. Where he goes wrong, and it's not even eloquent. I think Qasim was being generous. I don't even think it's eloquent. I think it's very crudely put, is that you can have world conquest by taking this concept of jihad, and then you can subjugate people to accept Islam through punishment of pain and death. And that is absolutely not what the Prophet of Islam did. Now, they might say, contradict that the Prophet of Islam did do that in certain circumstances, but we very strongly believe none of those circumstances that they contend he did are correct.
That paragraph.
Are you saying the Prophet did something wrong? What do you mean they're not correct?
They will say that the Prophet actually did, when he was in a position of authority,
Sure, yes.
subjugate and
Right.
and
He did not do that?
No, he did not.
Okay, we'll come back to that in another show. But I want to come back to our topic here that we're sharing around true Islam rejects all forms of terrorism. Now you've shared some counter verses around, and I will just read these to you. Do not go about committing inequity in the earth and causing disorder. They seek to create disorder, and Allah loves not those who create disorder. Seek not to create disorder in the earth. Verily, God loves not those who seek to create disorder. Now, this is in order: verses chapter 29, verse 37, chapter 5, verse 65, chapter 28, verse 78, and I can keep going on and on. There's other verses around here as well. So it's fair to say there are individuals who follow the Madudi and the ISIS and this doctrine who've bought into that logic, who feel they can go commit terrorism. Have they not read these verses?
I don't think they have, to be perfectly honest. In fact, we have documented evidence from people who were captive under ISIS for 10, 11 months, a French journalist, for example, and he pointed out, we asked them on numerous occasions for a copy of the Quran. They didn't have the Quran. They didn't know how to read the Quran. MI5, the British intelligence agency, discovered that a strong religious identity actually prevented radicalization. Several of the extremists caught trying to go join ISIS.
So why are they doing this?
Because of lack of Muslim leadership. When you have corrupt Muslim leadership, you will find that the people who follow them are also corrupt. And this isn't a surprise. Prophet Muhammad foretold a time when the worst creatures on earth would be the clerics who would be leading the Muslims, that the masjids would be full of people but empty of guidance.
So is there proper Muslim leadership that is an organized leader who, worldwide who's countering these claims?
Yeah, there is. There's the Khalifa of Islam, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad. He is not only talking about how to deal with people, but he's acting it. He's going around the world to talk to political leaders, religious leaders, and anybody and everybody in between. That listen, Islam is a religion about justice, about truth, honesty, peace, and love. And he's showing it through his example.
And in how?
Well,
he?
He's led a jihad against this perverse jihad.
Who is
Who he is the leader of the faithful, the leader of the largest organized community of Muslims. He is the fifth successor to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the Messiah, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He was elected as a spiritual successor. He has no political agenda. He comes from a spiritual place. He's a man of holiness. And he commands a leader of a faithful by every Friday preaching a message of peace to tens of millions of people at the same time. He lives in exile from Pakistan, the very country that harbored Maududi. He's escaped the clutches of that militancy. He spent time in prison in that country, and he resides in the United Kingdom leading the faithful now.
Where can I find out more about him?
You can go to alislam.org or to the khalifaofislam.com website. But what's critical to note about Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, Khalifatul Masih the fifth head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, is that this spiritual office isn't something that was concocted 108, 109 years ago upon the demise of the promised Messiah and Mahdi al-Islam. This spiritual office is foretold in the Quran and promised by the Holy Prophet Muhammad.
Sure. So I'm sure there's good justification, but aren't you guys a small offshoot, that community? You don't represent very many Muslims in the world. I mean, is it unfair to make your community the leader and to share this point of view? I love your point of view, but aren't you guys, most people not even consider you Muslims?
Well, extremists don't consider us Muslims. But the reality is that, first of all, we're not just offering theory. We're offering a 130-year established history in 207 nations worldwide. The fact of the matter is that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, under the Khalifa of the Promised Messiah al-Islam, is the world's single largest, most organized Islamic sect anywhere on earth. We have over 16,000 mosques, run hundreds of hospitals. And again, what I want our viewers to understand is that this is not mere theory. This is practical application of the promise foretold by Prophet Muhammad himself.
Do you agree? I was under the impression this is a small group that isn't even considered Muslims by some. He's saying you guys are the largest Muslim community in the world?
Yeah.
Can you substantiate that?
We can very easily. I mean, there are tens of millions of Ahmadi Muslims in over 200 countries. In sub-Saharan Africa, the Pew poll in 2012 put our numbers above 8 million in just 13 or 14 countries. The majority of Ahmadis are African. Ahmadis are all over the world, and and Qasim's right, leadership matters. This is promised leadership. Muslims were awaiting this leadership. Promised meaning for centuries. It was promised that there would be a leader that would emerge, that would unite the faithful and revive Islam's teachings. The fifth successor to the promised Messiah, the Messiah that was foretold to come by the Prophet Muhammad. 1.5 billion Muslims wait for that Messiah, or waiting for that Messiah. This community, tens of millions, believe that Messiah has already come. He's met all the conditions that the Prophet said would take place. Not in a physical way where he would purge people and he would cleanse the earth of infidels, and there would be so much blood in the world and everyone would become Muslim. No, he came with a spiritual purpose, and he's revived Islam's teachings and brought people back to the essential teachings of Islam. In fact, Ahmadis are fundamentalists in that way. Not in the traditional nefarious sense, fundamentalist to the pure teachings of what the Prophet taught.
So this campaign is bubbling up. I love your points of views. This is a great campaign. How are you going to get the word out about this campaign? It seems like it's going to help national security of lots of countries. If understood by non-Muslims, I feel like it's going to help Muslims. I've seen a survey that's been conducted that says about half of Muslims, a scientific survey by YouGov says that about half of Muslims don't even understand the answers to these questions. So what are you doing about, it looks like the other point of view, at least by half, is winning. How are you getting the message out about this new campaign? What's the name of the campaign?
So the name of the campaign is the True Islam Campaign. And the way
True Islam and the Extremists.
True Islam and the Extremists. Why? Because we live in a world of both. And we're going to show what true Islam is. Because it is that higher ideology that will exterminate the extremists. We will get this word out through many different ways. One of the ways is grassroots, boots on the ground, having mosque sessions, having open mosques, going to libraries, going to schools, letting people know what true Islam actually is. That's the way it's going to happen. That's the way it's going to change.
Our elected officials are not very happy with Muslims in general because they're afraid what's going on in these mosques. They're afraid. How are you educating the elected officials?
Well, partners in peace. Leadership matters, and we need to engage our own leaders. As Ahmadi Muslims, true Islam, you have to be loyal to the country you live in and serve it. We're very proud American Muslims. We have a caucus on Capitol Hill, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus. The purpose of it is not to just defend the rights of our own persecuted brethren. The purpose is to defend religious freedom for all. And that message, bipartisan support, well over 25 lawmakers already in just a few years, true Islam has spread on Capitol Hill. His Holiness, the Khalifa of the Promised Messiah, has come to Capitol Hill and given the message of true Islam to the lawmakers.
And so, Qasim, you've written on this topic. Yeah. You've done lots of work on this subject. How is this being received?
Well, it begins with education. We've launched a comprehensive social media campaign to specifically reach out to those people who are already discussing Islam. We are writing countless op-eds and letters to the editors. My colleague Salam mentioned about exterminating extremists. I want to make sure I qualify that. This is a peaceful jihad of education. So what we're exterminating are evil ideas, are unjust ideas. Mm-hmm. And to take those who are prone to extremism and turn them into the compassionate, loving Muslims that Prophet Muhammad himself taught during his time. So look for the social media campaigns on Facebook and Twitter, look for op-eds, look for interviews, and look for town halls in your city or in mosques near you.
Great.
And please attend them.
Thank you.
And the reason why we're going to social media is because ISIS and these other extremists are using social media to recruit youth.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So the campaign that's launched is called True Islam and the Extremists. It's to preserve national security of the United States of America. It's to educate Muslims and non-Muslims about the true teachings of Islam. There's 11 points in this campaign. We just discussed point number 1, which is true Islam does not promote terrorism, or true Islam rejects all forms of terrorism, and that's driven by the Quran, the sayings of the Prophet, the actions of the Prophet, as well as great leadership under the Khalifa, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad. Thank you for being here. We are on open forum. Thank you for joining us.